Good morning. This is Paul and Heather on the Evolve to Win show.
Happy Monday.
How are you?
Today, we're going to be talking about influence, which is the single most important leadership trait or characteristic, right?
Yes.
If you ask John Maxwell, he will tell you leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And we are going to share with you a leadership strategy that is the single most important strategy that you could work on and develop if, that is, you want to increase your influence. So I think the first thing to really figure out is, where do you want more influence? Now, there are so many different places to look for influence. And quite frankly, when we present this material in front of a group of people and we talk about what would it be like to change your influence at work, they get sort of excited, right? If you could be more influential and get more people to do a better job, that's a great thing to have in leadership. But what's interesting is a lot of people really get on board when we say, what if you could have a higher level of influence with your spouse or with your kids? Like, how important would that be? And that's usually when people really start to tune in, because of course it really matters at home.
Yes. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks for joining us. Are you all posted?
I am.
Okay. Dynamic adaptation is the leadership strategy that we're going to be talking about today. And it's like literally your superpower to ignite your influence. Dynamic adaptation is essentially this. It's knowing that every single situation that you're in is dynamic. It's unique. It's different. And it requires you to be a different way. So different people you encounter are unique. They're one of a kind. They need different things. They want different things. And so as a leader, I need to be dynamic and adapt to each situation, each person, based on what they need, based on what motivates them, what drives them, based on the behavior that they need from me. If I truly want to gain influence, if I want to gain rapport, if I want to gain trust, which is really at the base of everything related to influence.
Yeah. So I totally think about dynamic adaptation of kind of like, we were on your dad's boat. Maybe last week, it was his birthday, right?
Yeah.
And so, he's in this beautiful place, and they have this marina where they just put in these new floating docks. And I don't know if you've ever seen this before. I don't know if this is a new thing or new technology or whatever, but it's a concrete dock, but it's on floats. And the reason that they do that is because when the tide goes out, up or down, the dock actually rises and falls with the tides. And that really helps, because we saw a perfect example of that with the hurricane and the way the water came out. Just tell a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when you have a fixed dock, so one that's not floating, in the hurricane, they actually had this happen at Tin City, where there was one of the larger commercial boats tied up to the dock. And as you know, with the storm surge, all of the water left the bay there. And so this boat was tied so tightly. They did a great job securing the boat. Yeah. The problem was the dock was also secure. So when that water receded, the boat literally took the entire dock with it, as we understand it. So I guess that's very different, having a fixed dock compared with a floating dock. But please do make the connection for us. How on earth does that relate to dynamic
So in dynamic adaptation, what Heather was explaining to you is that you are really adapting, just like with the tide, whether it's high or low, that floating dock actually goes up and down with it. So in the same way that as we are with interacting with people on a daily basis, that we should be adapting to the style, the personality of that particular person that we're with to have better influence.
I got it.
Does it make sense?
It does make sense. I've always used the metaphor or the analogy of the chameleon, but I get this. I get where you're going with this. So the dock moves with the moving tide, is kind of like you as an individual moving with whatever circumstance you find yourself in.
Right.
Okay, so I get that. And so we want you to be a floating dock.
From now on.
So let me give a very practical example of what we're talking about with dynamic adaptation, because as I said before, dynamic adaptation is seriously your superpower in leading other people, in really engaging a higher level of influence. Because what you're doing essentially is you are authentically recognizing someone for who they are, what they want, the way that they communicate, right?
Got it.
So giving a super simple example in business.
Mm-hmm.
when you're a boss meeting with one of your direct reports,
okay,
if you do all of your meetings the same way, let's say that you have a weekly meeting and it's scheduled for 1 hour. The challenge with that is there are certain employees who need more than one weekly meeting. They actually need a daily meeting if they're more of the passive style. And someone who's more of the dominant style, they probably only need to meet once a week for maybe 3 to 5 minutes, maybe 7 at the outside. But if you're forcing every different personality style into the same type of structured system, it's not always going to work so well. And if the key to influence is really building that relationship, that rapport, that trust with an individual, it means I can recognize from you, Paul, exactly what you need, and recognize also that you're very different from the next person. Right? Which I think we're all craving.
Absolutely.
Right? To be recognized for the unique individual that we are.
Yeah, and I think that, the problem is that we try to fit everybody into groups, and we try to treat everybody in groups. But in all actuality, we all want to be treated as individuals. We all think that we're special. We all think that we have these special...
We do.
Yeah, we do. And to really get the best...
Gifts.
Yeah, the gifts. To get the best out of a particular person, obviously we know the more time you spend with that person, and if you're really speaking to them the way that they want to be spoken to, you're going to get much better results. And I think this is a lot has to do with that whole disengagement, in the workforce, is that maybe a lot of leaders, maybe a lot of companies in general are treating everybody as a whole as opposed to as an individual. Well,
you talk about disengagement in the workplace, so let's just kind of summarize what is going on there. We are at record levels of disengagement in the workplace. Like over 70% of our workplace, according to the Gallup poll, is either disengaged or actively disengaged, which is a big challenge, I would say, for all of us. And what's really interesting is when you take that whole group of employees who are engaged or disengaged, the highest level of engagement comes from the managers and executives. Those are who are in leadership positions. So that's exciting, right? That's the good news. The bad news from the good news is that 38% is the score of managers and leaders when it comes to engagement. Only 38% of managers are engaged. So I think we've kind of found out why we have so much challenge with disengagement.
Okay, so since you are a leader in your company and you have to work with me on a daily basis, how would you adapt your style or dynamic adaptation to me? So let's role play that.
Okay, let's talk about this, because I get to work with my husband every day. And I know some of you out there are thinking, oh man, I wish I could work with my spouse. That would be the coolest thing in the world. And there are other people thinking, that is the very last thing I would be able to do, is work day in and day out with my spouse, because we're so different. Well, Paul and I are very different in our approach, in our styles, in our motivators, in our behaviors. And so what that requires to make us successful.
So perfect example, by the way, I was up here maybe an hour ago getting everything ready.
And I came rolling in on 2 wheels at like 1 minute till.
And Heather shows up 3 minutes to go and says, oh my God, I need to get a lint brush. And so she runs downstairs to go get the lint brush and then comes up screaming like her hair's on fire. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like 1 minute to go, but.
That's how we roll. So we're very different. Paul likes to plan. Paul likes to strategize. Paul likes to have a lot of conversation about what we're doing in a day. And I would prefer to just jump into the day and start doing. So you can imagine that requires adaptation on both of our parts. But in particular for Paul, you are a more passive and reserved style. Like some would say that Paul is really laid back, and that's who he is generally. But I know enough about his strengths, his motivators, what he needs from me, that I have to slow down and bring my patience way up, because I don't naturally have that. That's a big drawback for me, is that I am in my nature, at my core, a very impatient, very fast moving individual. You at your
So
core,
what does dynamic adaptation look like speaking to me?
Well, you at your core are one of the most patient, like slower paced, patient type of human beings. So I've got to find within me this reserve of patience and bring it out. What I know you need is daily interaction, right? To just sit down, and you don't need hours of my time, but I know that we need to meet every day. And if we don't, you feel frustrated because you're not exactly sure what your focus should be.
But we don't meet every day.
Because I have to adapt to meet with you every day.
But you don't all the time.
I don't all the time. That's right. So it's not, okay, the theory of dynamic adaptation is a simple theory, right? You adapt to what someone needs. If I want to get the best from Paul, I know for a fact I need to meet with you every single day. Yes. I know that that gets the best from you. But do I always do it? No, because sometimes I revert into my habitual way of being, which is, by the way, where we live naturally about 95% of the time.
Yep.
So if 95% of the time I'm doing things my way, I'm running with my hair on fire, that would never, ever serve Paul, and you would end up just completely frustrated all the time.
So it's Correct? Not easy to do.
No,
it's really taking yourself out of your habit and having to consciously focus on that.
Yes.
Right.
So
yeah.
and what would you need to do to adapt to my style?
Well, we're not talking about me.
Oh yeah, we are. No. Let's actually go there because.
But I do when I'm speaking to people that are much more fast paced and they speak faster. I know that I need to increase that. I know I need to move quickly. I know I need to speak quickly. I know that I need to make my point quickly, And so, fortunately, living with you and working with you, I've learned how to do that and become. So that's how.
Yeah.
That's how.
Dynamic adaptation for me, he has to speed up a bit and be a little bit more concise and direct and prepared. Mm-hmm. And I know I have to slow down a bit. So there may be those who say, well, then you're not really being authentic. You're not being you. Right?
True.
But here's the deal. There is a massive difference, and I really, really want you to get this. There's a huge difference between dynamic adaptation, which is really recognizing, valuing, embracing someone for exactly who they are and what they need, or manipulation. Manipulation is when I change who I'm being because I want something from you. That is not what dynamic adaptation is all about. And quite honestly, we've been teaching this for years and years, and there are a lot of people who really, really struggle with it. And so let me just give an example. One of our clients, we had these clients that we were working with in a group setting. We were coaching a number of executives at this company. And we taught them dynamic adaptation. We taught them that it's all about really recognizing and honoring who someone is and what they need from you in the moment to get the most out of them, which is what leadership's all about, right?
Got it.
So we're teaching dynamic adaptation, and everyone's like, okay, I got it. First thing we had to do is we had to teach them who they were. Now there's an easy way to do that, and there's a more difficult way to do that. We use assessments, so we get rid of any mystery, right? So teach everyone who they are. How do I show up for other people, right? Then part two is they've got to really identify the other person, who they are, what they need, so that then I can adapt, right? So we go through and we do all this teaching. And one of the most important components of this teaching is that you want to make sure that you're the one responsible for the dynamic adaptation. Do not hold out the hope that someone else is going to adapt to you, because I promise you, if you make it someone else's goal to adapt to you, you're going to be let down and you're going to be frustrated. Perfect example. We have these people, Lisa and Jeff. Lisa reports to Jeff. Jeff is very much sort of by the book, driven, very analytical person. Lisa, on the other hand, is like happy-go-lucky and fun, and like everything at work in her leadership is about making it fun. So Lisa decides that she wants to plan a pep rally for her department. And wouldn't this be super fun? So she sends an email to Jeff about this pep rally. And when she shows up for her coaching session, she is sideways. So what happens is she brings a copy of the email with her to our coaching session to show us how Jeff has failed to adapt to her style. So we said, all right, Lisa, share with us a little bit about that email. And Lisa says, well, I wrote this email to Jeff, and I was like, Jeff, we're going to have a pep rally, and it's going to be really great, and we're going to get the department all engaged, and it's going to be fun, and we're going to set up this competition, and we're going to win this award that our department's been going after for a long time, and everyone's going to get engaged. It's going to be perfect. She goes, do you know what Jeff wrote back to me? I said, no, what? Well, Jeff wrote back, what is the specific measurable objective for this pep rally? How much is it going to cost? How are we going to measure the results from the pep rally? Jeff. So she says, you see, he didn't adapt at all. He knows I'm one of those people who just like gets excited about things and wants to talk. And he just writes these 3. See, he doesn't know how to adapt. Mm-hmm. And I was like, Lisa, let's just check on your adaptation to Jeff first and foremost. So how did you do in positioning the email to Jeff? At which point she looks at me, she's like, oh my gosh. She's like, I used a lot of exclamation points. I used a lot of emojis. I used a lot of words. Like she had a 4-paragraph message to him. And he had, of course, his 3 questions that were specific. So I said, how did you do, Lisa? She's like, I was terrible. She said, I was being exactly me, expecting him to adapt to my style. That's not dynamic adaptation. She wasn't using her own rule book. Instead, she was making that a reason to get mad at Jeff, right?
Yep.
So
that's a great story.
I think it's what happens when you first learn the concept of dynamic adaptation. Our colleague, Tony Alessandra, he teaches it like this. He calls it the platinum rule. So if the golden rule is treat others the way you want to be treated, we've all kind of grown up learning that rule. The platinum rule is treat others the way they want to be treated. And that really is at the core of dynamic adaptation. I've got to figure out who you are. I got to know what your strengths are, what your unique gifts are, so that I can truly speak to those and tap into those as in any meeting that we have together, right?
Great.
That's
all right,
dynamic
let's wrap
adaptation.
This thing
up. Okay, let's wrap it up. You go, you wrap up.
I'm just going to wrap up. I'm going to say, hey, so dynamic adaptation. Remember.
Wait, Joe asked a question there.
Remember the floating dock. It's all about who you're with, who the behavioral styles, the personalities you're with, making sure that you're matching them, making sure that you are adapting to them to get the highest influential results that you're looking for.
Okay, so Joe, you have a great comment here. He's saying that he totally agrees. He's seen way too many managers just be who they're being rather than adapt their style for what's needed in the moment. So this, my friends, dynamic adaptation is the single most important thing that you could possibly work on to increase your influence. So if you want to learn more about it, you can reach out to us. You find us at heatherchristie.com. If you haven't already signed up for our leadership list, please do so, because we have a lot of information, a lot of materials that we'd love to share with you. And just want to say thanks so much for joining in. If by chance you have somebody who really needs to hear this message, please share it.
Have a great day and a great week.
Take care.
Bye.